Hey, welcome to the Memphis Flyer podcast. I am Chris McCoy. Every week, we at the Memphis Flyer hop here on YouTube to talk about what's in the paper and what you need to know in the Memphis area this week. And this week, it's all about Indie Memphis. The film festival, now in its 27th year, has been bringing unique films to Memphis all along. This year, it has a much more local focus. But we're going to get to that here in just a minute. I'll tell you all about it. What else is going on in the paper this week, which you can pick up a physical copy in one of these boxes here that looks like this. It's all around the county. Or you can go to memphisflyer.com and check us out online if you want to do that. But we have a lot of great stuff this week. First of all, Jackson Baker, who was on the podcast last week, I recommend you go check that out if you haven't seen it. We talked about the election fallout, and Jackson's got even more this week on his in his column. This is really Jackson being more. He calls it thumb sucking rather than reporting, because he is a great reporter of politics, the best one in the state, I think. But he this week really goes deep in what it all means, and so I definitely recommend that you check that out. On the music front, we've got Alex Green talking about I Make Mad Beats' new record. That's going to come out this weekend. He has a record release party on Saturday night at the Pink Palace, which is now the Pink Palace again, by the way. They tried to rebrand it to Mosh for a few years, and they just finally gave up because nobody called it that. So they're calling now Mosh is the overarching system of museums that they manage, and the Pink Palace is the Pink Palace again, because you look at it, it's pink, right? I Make Mad Beats is having a record release party for his new album Wands in the Pink Palace Planetarium, and there's going to be projection, laser light, all kinds of stuff to go with it, and the story that Alex Green wrote in the flyer is great. For one reason, is that he knows Mad and has worked with him before, and Mad talks about his struggles with an autoimmune disease that almost sidelined him from music making altogether. And how he came back through basically learning to play the piano, and also just sheer determination. I mean, the guy's got, that's just Mad. That's just how he works. He's determined to get the job done and to continue to make art. And this new record is called Wands, and it is the first album of original material from Mad in, I think, 4 or 5 years. I'm really looking forward to hearing it, and you can check out more about that on the Memphis Flyer. We've also got a whole lot more events in the event in our we recommend in our events column. And here in just a few minutes, we're going to be talking to Daniel Lynn about the Coffee Expo, which is also this weekend. But first, let's talk about Indie Memphis. So I've been covering Indie Memphis for a long time. I've been involved in the festival personally for a long time as a filmmaker too, and it's one of the best events that this city has and has had for a long time. This year, it's more locally focused than it has been in time past. We have 7 local features, and which is a huge number, and some of them are really interesting. Well, let me back up. All of them are really interesting, actually. We've got a history of Lamorno in college. We've got a revival from Anwar Jameson of his first feature, which is called Funeral Arrangements. And Anwar, the last few years, has become a major filmmaker in Africa. He made a film called Coming to Africa about people from Memphis going to Ghana and discovering, African culture. And it was a big hit in Africa. And then he made a sequel called Coming to Africa 2. And it's just been, I mean, he gets award. They go to award shows in Africa, and it's he's created his own export market basically. For films out, based here. He is currently a University of Memphis professor, and coming to Funeral Arrangements was his first film. This is the 15th anniversary of his first film, and I remember when it played the first time, and it's funny, it's charming, and I highly recommend checking that out. Of course, and there's a lot more. The opening night film, which is on Thursday night, is called "It Was All a Dream," and it's a film by Dream Hampton, who is a hip hop journalist and filmmaker who was there in the '90s during the golden age of hip hop. I mean, there's footage of Biggie Smalls inside the studio. Snoop Dogg, Q-Tip, all kinds of folks that Dream Hampton had access to back then and had filmed, but had sort of tucked that film away and not used it. So that is going to be really big. A lot of big names in hip hop are in this film, and it's just going to be it's a fascinating look at the early days of the genre that we all sort of take for granted now. Sunday night, the centerpiece film is called Nickel Boys, and it is about two young black men in Florida in the 1960s who end up in a reform school, and it is shot by the same person who shot All Dirt Road's Taste of Salt, which was last year's opening night film at Indie Memphis. And it is a unique film in its first-person perspective, so that a lot of times you're seeing what the main characters are seeing, right? And it goes back and forth between the two boys as far as who is the main character, who is the point of view at any given time. And this has been done before, Dark Passage from the 40s, which was a Humphrey Bogart movie, but I don't think it's ever quite been done like this. It's a fascinating film, and I highly recommend it to everybody. And there's stuff all weekend at Indie Memphis. This is going to be, Indie Memphis is at the Crosstown Theater, the opening night, and is at Crosstown Theater. And there's several more screenings at Crosstown, and then also at Studio on the Square. Saturday night is a Corey Feldman film called Birthday that has been lost for a long time, and that this is a revival. And he says it's his best, the best thing he ever did. And it is. I'm really, really looking forward to that one. I haven't had a chance to see that one yet. I have seen several, though, of the hometowners. Like I said, we have 7 hometowner features this year. And I've interviewed all those directors. And so you can read about some of those films in my Indie Memphis cover story in the flyer this week. And here now is a few excerpts from those interviews that we did on Zoom. And so I'm just going to let some of these directors speak on their own. Let them tell you about their films and about what they're doing.
So, this year we're in November. So November 14th is opening night, and it's going to end on the 17th. We are also having encores because our biggest complaint is that we have too many films back to back that people want to see. So that was a direct response to our audience. I'm really excited to see how everyone thinks of our opening night film. I think that's going to be really awesome. I really enjoyed watching it, especially because seeing footage of Biggie Smalls, Prodigy from Mobb Deep, Method Man, and even Snoop Dogg, like before they became icons and before they realized how big they were to the world. They're just hungry artists, even Q-Tip is in it. And the other night, Q-Tip was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I was thinking about that, like, as I was watching the awards, like, he was like such a baby in this film. Like, he had no clue 20, 30 years from now he was going to be on this stage. So I'm really excited to see how everyone responds to the film. But I think they're going to really love it. But this year, We've got a lot of cool things that we're doing for the first time. So like this is the first year that we're combining the Youth Film Fest with the annual fest. And so that's really cool. Being able to allow the youth filmmakers to still have their own dedicated time, but also be able to interact and see other films that are outside of their festival. We do have some films that are a little bit more family friendly than what we have had in the past, like Flow, Boys Go to Jupiter. There's a few other ones as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond to it. Overall, we did notice like certain like themes with the programming. So like we did notice that there are quite a few films, especially documentaries, that focus on the environment, both fictional and nonfiction. And so I thought it was interesting because, of course, when Kayla, our director of programming, yes, she is our director of programming, when she selected these films, of course, we had no idea some of the more recent impacts, like from the hurricanes and things of that nature, would happen. But it's very interesting how timely everything is. We also we're seeing like film like used as like a critique of the status quo. I think a lot more than like typical years. So like what I mean by that is like seeing like film like really like kind of questioning things that kind of seem like they're normal. Familiar Touch is one that I thought was very interesting. It's a coming of older age story. And everyone, I won't say everyone, but I will say personally, I've had to, you know, work with a family member who transitioned to a senior home, but we don't actually ever see on their side what that might look like or what might be going through, what their emotional state might be going through, and how they have to transition. They have to go through their own transition, you know, emotionally, mentally, and everything like that. So I think that is also a film I think won an award at Berlinale. Nickel Boys. I'm really excited about that film. That's a centerpiece film for us. But also, you know, again, it uses film like as a critique. It's based on the novel from Colson Whitehead that won a Pulitzer Prize. But still, you know, it was so common for I won't say common, but you know, no one really questioned um, you know, detention centers, you know, for for kids. And so you have this film that is a beautiful adaptation of the book. Jomo Frey, who is the cinematographer behind Raven Jackson's All Dirt Roads Taste of Salt, he's a cinematographer for this film. So really excited to see that on the screen.
And I've been filmmaking now since about 2016, and just like self-producing feature films and going that route. Now that you know technology and stuff makes it easier, and just decided to you know jump out there and you know don't take no for an answer, and just started producing my own work. So yeah, Cubic Zirconia is the latest movie, and I'm excited to see the response that it gets.
Well, cool. Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about it. Where'd you get the idea?
I have this thing that I'm doing called the Sticks Universe. That's based on a web series that I created a couple years back, and I recently released the movie The Sticks, and it's a character in that movie, Bobby Clark, that makes a brief appearance, and it's kind of going more into his story arc. It's a good old fashioned crime mystery. I like to say it's similar to something like Prisoners, or maybe even a touch of Seven for people who like those type of movies. And it's follows a missing family that these detectives are trying to find some answers to what happened. And then when they locate the mother of this missing family, deceased, then it's just an all-out blitz to find the children and figure out the why behind it all. And It's just one of those good old fashioned crime mystery thrillers that you won't get the answer. You may see some answers beforehand. You kind of got to pay attention, but when it comes to the end they realize what's happened, I believe it'll be a shocker to a lot of the audience members.
Yeah.
Mark he's a super competitive guy. And the question, and the big thing was like, and the people that knew him, and a lot of people didn't realize this from the outside, is that competitiveness would spill over a lot of times in terms of like trying to deal with teammates and different stuff like that. And we did, that's one of my favorite segments in the film. It's like 20 minutes about it, different stories people were telling. And Mark being very, looking back at everything through a different lens of today. And I think he looks at it very differently, where he felt like he could have been better, but he knows in his head, and different players say it in the film, they needed him to be like that. If that was the spillover of him chewing him out during a game, and then after the timeout was over, he was going to give it all and make a play on defense to save that guy, or make a play on offense to set that guy up, it was going to be worth it. But I think certain athletes, and I think all of us in general, as we get older, sometimes if you reach success or you're happy with what your career has done, you start to look back at like, what was that cost to that? You know what I mean? What got damaged from that? Was I nice enough to people, different stuff like that? In reality, it probably isn't important. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think Mark has a bunch of teammates that are like, oh, Mark was such a jerk. I think Mark has a bunch of teammates that were like, Mark really helped me win. Like, he made me into a winner and stuff like that.
I actually got into filmmaking through fashion. So I was working I was working in textile art for a while, and I was making a lot of costumes, and then a lot of the things that I was making didn't really make sense in our reality right now. So I was starting to build stories around the costumes I was making, and then wanted to create films out of those costumes, and then realized, oh, this is a potential career that I could follow. And yeah, so then I started doing videography commercially, and in addition to all these little small fashion films on the side. And then yeah, so then film and video started becoming more of my storytelling practice, and more of a tool of how I could explain and share what I was learning with the world. Prior to getting that money, the vision for the documentary was very DIY, like really, really like lo-fi. Was not expecting this to be a full-fledged film, really. It was like, let's try to get these oral histories out there, by whatever we need to do to get it out there. I mean, it could be, the quality probably won't be great, but what's important is the stories will be out. And by quality, I mean, just like the lighting and the audio recording, those sorts of things. So
The
to be
production
able to,
values.
exactly, to be able to have that money to really just dive in and see how far we could take the actual production value was just enormous. And yeah, it's much more beautiful than I ever thought we could make it. And I think that I think that will just help us be able to share these stories with more people.
So are you from Memphis?
I am, yes, I grew up in Memphis.
So yeah, this is obviously a story that you that you were familiar with and felt strongly about, right?
Actually, I wasn't that familiar with it. And that's the crazy part, is like growing up as a Chinese American in Memphis, I didn't learn about any of this until 2020. And because it was only because of all the things that were happening in the world, and especially to people who look like me. So yeah, that's why I think we're pushing this film so hard, is because like this isn't something that a lot of us get to learn when we're growing up, because there just hasn't been a lot of there hasn't been a lot of discussion or platforms that are sharing these stories. And as someone who, I consider a lot of the people that we talk about as my ancestors or my elders or my community members, but I didn't meet a lot of them until very recently. So um, and I think I really hope that no matter how late someone is in their journey, that when they do find this connection to their roots, that they feel like they can just jump in and embrace it. So I think one of the most powerful things I learned was that there is a long history of Chinese American immigration in Memphis. And I really just didn't have a consciousness of it at all, really. I knew that I went to Chinese school growing up in Memphis, and I was lucky enough to have a lot of other family friends around that were Chinese. And I was lucky that my parents really did a good job of preserving that culture. But as far as like a connection with the city and a connection with other communities in Memphis, I never had a consciousness of that. So I think being able to have a relationship with my mentor, Emerald, who is the other lead character of the film, she has really taught me that I am one person in a long lineage of people who have made their life in Memphis and have found success and happiness. So, but prior to that, I just didn't think. I was like, oh, Memphis is, it's kind of weird that there are Chinese people here. We're sort of just like immigrants. We're coming in and then we're leaving. And yeah, but I didn't have a lot of examples of people who were really making roots in Memphis who were from the Chinese community.
15 years of, since funeral arrangements, man.
Yeah.
Well, it just feels weird.
It does. Wow, to say 15 years, but it's a great feeling.
Yeah. Well, it really started you off on a good, on a good foot, I feel like. And I was talking to Kamal the other day, and I was like, honestly, he's one of the most like successful filmmakers that's come out of the Indie Memphis scene, I feel like, because of, all this coming to Africa, 2 of those, and everything. So tell me about funeral arrangements, man.
Man, when you talk about a passion project, I just think back to being in film school in the graduate program at the University of Memphis. And now it's a full circle moment because I'm teaching at the University of Memphis and I have grad students and working on these projects. And I look back like, wow, that was me. And now I understand why my professors were telling me no and that I was crazy to try to do a feature film for this final project when I only needed 15 minutes. But I'm like, no, I have this script. So we just had a bunch of young, hungry crew. No one had done a feature, whether it was the crew or the actors. Had a lot of theater students in it, and everybody were just like, wow, this would be cool. They all saw my vision. I had the script, being that I come from a writing background, and everybody really jumped on board to make it happen. And I feel like it was the perfect storm of young creativity and energy, and it really showed in the final product, and I'm proud of it. So most of the things I've written start out as something that happened in real life, and then I take it and fictionalize it and say that would be cool. So when I was in undergrad, actually, my very first screenwriting class that I took, my professor called the morning after. We had the final project was to write the first act of a feature film. And I turned it in and she called me early that morning before the class. And I'm like, why is this professor calling me? And she was like, I really enjoyed the script. Could we use it as the example in class to read for, the others? And I was like, wow. So that let me know I was on to something, but it was based on an experience I had working a job that really was like that. I couldn't be absent again. So I really lied to the supervisor and told him I had to go to a funeral. And he really said, bring me, the death notice or whatever, obituary. And in real life, I didn't do it and he didn't bother me. I ended up keeping my job. But as a writer in my mind, it was like, whoa, that would be funny. What if the guy really went to a funeral and now he gets caught up in a situation, and it just came from there.
I'm from North Carolina originally, and I've thought about my work as a documentarian really since I started making films 10 years ago, is trying to promote issues that I care about, environment and social justice issues. I feel like are great topics to sort of raise through this platform. And I was initially interested in looking at contemporary issues with environmental justice in Eastern North Carolina with hog and chicken farm over industrialization, and went down there and was working for 2 or 3 months on a film about that, and ran into another film crew that ended up making the film The Smell of Money, I mean, they had already invested a couple years into that project. And in my, so I decided to pivot. And in my research, I had read about Warren County being the birthplace of environmental justice, which was just a couple counties away from where the hog farms are right now. So I thought, if they're going to make this film, someone needs to make this film that explains the history that this movement actually has been going on for 40 years, really in essentially the same place. And no one's written a book about it. No one's made a film about it in all that time. So this actually seems like more critical to actually tell the story that it seems to have been forgotten. So I was shocked, honestly, that no one had told the story to date. And that was a little bit overwhelming, like just to have that pressure to be the first, but to try to do it right. So I hope that if there, my hope was to do it successfully, and I think the folks in the county like really appreciate it. So if they feel good about it, I feel good about it. So I'm been really fortunate to be able to go around and share the film at places like Indie Memphis since we completed it this spring.
So I originally grew up outside of Nashville, but my mom and her side of the family are from Memphis. And so I've spent a lot of time in Memphis, many summers, many holidays, many one-off trips visiting my grandparents and cousins in Memphis. So Memphis is near and dear to my heart. I am new to filmmaking in some regards. In a informal sense, growing up, I used to like to make YouTube videos and tell stories just online. And I was an English minor in college, but embarked on this filmmaking journey a few years ago when my granddad, who's from Memphis, asked me to write a story about his life. And because of the fact that he was still alive and he has just a really powerful testimony coming from himself, and I was interested in film already, I said, why don't we make a documentary film? And that is the genesis of the Big Time film.
Wow. Well, tell me about Big Time.
Yeah, so Big Time is actually the nickname that my granddad had. It's because when he was a student, he was a basketball player, and the coaches and the other players like to say that he showed up big time on the court when the team needed him most. But that nickname stuck throughout his life because he also showed up big time for his community. And after graduating from Rusk College in Mississippi, where he participated in the civil rights movement there, he continued to participate in the movement in Memphis and also was an educator in the school system there. And as an educator, he definitely inspired many students. He also was a basketball coach, and he was at several Memphis schools, but he found the most success at Fairleigh High School in Whitehaven. And that is a big part of the story of Big Time, is talking about his impact on the school, on the sports culture, and also talking about his relationship with the community, the players, and also the other administrators. It was a really special time in Fairleigh High School and Whitehaven's history. And Big Time not only captures his legacy, but the overall legacy that the community had during that time period.
Like I said, Indie Memphis is not the only thing going on this weekend. We've also got Coffee Expo, and I'm going to introduce Daniel Lynn, who is the engineer on this podcast. And here at Archer Studios, he's the man in charge. And he's also the man in charge of the Coffee Expo.
Yep. It's just me.
Yeah. Well, so tell us about the Coffee Expo.
Absolutely. The Grind City Coffee Expo, it's year 5. We started in 2019. So it's grown from 8 coffee vendors all the way up to this year we have 26. So, and they're local and national at this point. So what you do is you buy a ticket. You get a little tasting mug that you get to carry around. It's made by William Leschek. And you get samples of coffee. Or we have tea. We have gelato on a stick from Dipstickle, and tons of pastry options from like Lulu's Bakery and Hustle and Dough. And then you get to sample anything you want with your ticket. Also, Art Bar has partnered with us this year, and they're going to do coffee-infused cocktails. So we have 3 different ones of those created by Spencer and the team over at Art Bar. And then we have 3 called like discussion panels. So the first one is going to be cupping. So that's literally the art of tasting coffee. Second one is going to be cooking with coffee. So anywhere from barbecue, baking, and beer. So I've got Bryant Bain from Bain's Barbecue coming over, Brandy Martyr from Bedrock Eats and Sweets, and then Hopper Seeley from Grind City Brewery, all talking about what they do with coffee in their practice. And those are that'll happen around 11:30, and then the last panel is just Ask a Barista. So anytime you've ever wanted to ask a barista a question, like what's the worst drink you've ever made, or anything like that, like how annoying are customers really? Those are the panels, and this year we've added members from the Memphis Symphony Orchestra. There's gonna be 3 quartets there. There's also gonna be a virtual art gallery created by Catherine Hicks of Bevo. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Bevo, but that installation over there on Mud Island now.
Yeah, they're working on it. It's the Baron von Opperbeen's River of Time, I think is what it's eventually going to be called. It's going to be a giant interactive art installation in the tradition of Meow Wolf or the City Museum or something like that. It's going to be really great. That's a good get for you guys.
Yeah, Catherine, she's been amazing. She's creating the Espresso Art Gallery. So you'll be able to take your avatar and move it through virtual art and everything. And we'll have that set up at the expo. And then Chewy from Ink Therapy is going to do some flash tattoos for us.
Wow.
So just all the things, all the things all the time.
You know what we didn't mention is, where is it?
It's at Crosstown Arts. So upstairs in the art gallery space within the Crosstown Concourse, up those fancy red stairs where everybody likes to take pictures.
It's going to be a good time, and also Indie Memphis is going to be going on in the Crosstown Theater. So if you want to go get all hyped up before you go to your Indie Memphis events, then the expo is definitely a great place to do that. It's a great event. I've been the last couple of years, and we really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And bought a lot of coffee too.
Perfect. Yeah, and to tie in Indie Memphis, which I love as well. I've worked on a lot of films over the years.
He really has.
Any Indie Memphis pass holder gets free entry to the Coffee Expo.
That's the Grind City Coffee Expo. It's going to be a big weekend in Memphis. So get out, have fun, do stuff. And this has been the Memphis Flyer podcast, and we will see you next week.